Urban Odyssey, a bicentennial project of the DC Community Humanities Council.
The Caribbean presence in Washington, D.C. dates back to the early city and is documented in an 1870 census. Today, it is an enduring feature of Washington's multicultural landscape. Many Caribbean immigrants came to the city to further their education, stayed, and enriched the life of Washington, D.C., taking their places in civic and government affairs. Lillian Walker, Caribbean community stalwart and mother figure to a generation of the district's West Indians, was among the first wave of newcomers that followed the independence of many Caribbean states in the 1960s. She was a bridge in the transition of those students, diplomats, and immigrants looking for a new life in a strange place, introducing them to the city and the city to them. This segment of the DC Community Humanities Council's Urban Odyssey series celebrates Lillian Walker and Washington, D.C.'s Caribbean community.
I bet if you should ask any foreigner when was the first time they came to America, they would tell you the exact date, perhaps even the time. August 14, 1962, 8 days after Jamaica declared itself a nation. School should begin the following week, so I had to get to Washington in order to settle in. I was going to do my degree in education, English literature. I took the Pan Am evening flight from Kingston to Miami. My entire clan from all over came to the Palisados International Airport, as it was called in those days before we named things after our own national hero. Of course, they had to send little Lily off in style. My grandmother, grandfather, my mother, aunts, uncles, cousins, and more cousins. As I walked out to the plane, I would stop every so much feet to wave to the pinheads in the waving gallery. Mama G was wearing tangerine like me, so every time I stopped, I would try to find the tangerine spot in the crowd. At the plane door, I stopped and I waved one last time. It was the last view I would have of my people over the next 4 years. By this time, tears were streaming down my face like a swollen river. Mama G used to say, "Lillian girl, if you want good, your nose have to run." Well, run it did. I was happy, sad, excited all at the same time. No, sir, I was terrified. Suppose I got lost. Suppose they did not have me enrolled. Suppose I lost my money. On the plane, I sat next to this black man. There were only 4 of us on the flight. Blacks, I mean. His name was George Wilson. He was a security guard at the United Nations in New York. He told me everything about Washington, and he warned me to be careful because it was still segregated in the South. By the time we got to Miami, I was twice as terrified as before. In Miami, it took so long to clear customs that I missed my connecting flight to Washington, which of course ended up being the last flight for the evening. The ticket counter was deserted, not a soul in sight. I was stranded. Hotel! I was not about to be lynched in Bacra country. No way. I just opened my little blue plaid carry-on bag with the cut cake, hard-dough bread, bami, fried fish my grandmother had prepared, sat on a chair in the airport and fed me misery, tears streaming down my face. That was my first taste of loneliness. That's how I spent my first night in America. The following morning, I arrived in Washington, travel-weary, but looking none too worse for the wear. The tangerine and white suit, tangerine spiked heels, white handbag, hat, and gloves to match had all withstood the test. In those days, a well-dressed woman of class traveling was not to be seen without her hat and gloves. Taking the plane was like going to church. You had to be dressed in your finest. It's not like nowadays when you can wear any and anythings. Jeans, t-shirt, slippers. The following day, when Caroline, that's my niece, was going home on holidays, she just hauled on a pair of denim shorts, t-shirt, and those ridiculous-looking boogers, athletic shoes that she even wears with her suits to work. I hate them shoes. Them favor what Mama G used to call slam patters. Every morning, I see a battalion of women dressed to kill Puss Backfoot in the required suit of the corporate army, face made up, wearing pearl earrings, choker a la Barbara Bush, dark suits, pale blouses with little bow ties, no cleavages allowed, and on them foot, them all wearing the same slam patters they pay a fortune for. It drives me crazy. When I was growing up, crepe soles is what poor people used to wear. People who could not afford real shoes. Why they just don't wear sensible dress shoes is beyond me. Thank God I am a teacher. The children don't care what I wear. I guess they couldn't. What they wear is beyond me. Now they are beyond me. When I just started to teach, children knew and understood the meaning of respect. Nowadays, suffice it to say, times have surely changed. Now we spoil the rod, but spare the child. I got my fair share, you know, and I am none the worse for it. You know, in the old days, when Washington had neighborhoods, it would sometimes remind me of Jamaica. People would look out for and after other people's children. You know what I mean? Remember when you were growing up, if you did anything wrong in the street, any adult could whip you. And if you got a whipping in school, you were afraid. You wouldn't dare go home and complain because most likely you'd get another whipping. Remember? The community was like a family. And even though I was an outsider, I could have felt that in Washington in the old days. Now, 30 years later, 30 years? My God, I have been in this country for 30 years, over half my life. I don't believe it. I came for 4 years to study. And I stayed and I got my PhD. And I stayed to help my little sister through school. And I stayed. People sometimes say, you have been in this country for so long and you still have your accent. How come? And I always say, you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. Rose really know how to make a black cake. She should open a little pastry shop when she retires, as long as it's not on Georgia Avenue. The resident baker would probably die from apoplexy. She has made black cake for every wedding, engagement, christening, wake setup that I have been to since I've been here. Too numerous to count. She's baking the cake for Haya's granddaughter's christening, and I am crocheting this blanket. At least that's what I say. Now I know I'm really getting old. I used to hate crocheting. When I was a teenager, Mama G, that's my grandmother, she dead and gone, used to force me to sit and crochet squares every Sunday evening after Sunday school. And when darkness came down, she would light the parlor lamp. We would sit, listen to the radio, and make squares. The only thing I liked about making squares was Mama G's stories, and Nancy stories, Duppy stories, old-time stories, you know what I mean? Lily, you finished the washing up? Come, child, come help me with this. Stay away from those Jay-Z ears, boys. Them no mean you no good. Come in and study your books, child. Your teacher say you're bright, but you won't apply yourself. How you expect to turn somebody? Eh? Education, education. Don't farm fool, girl. Don't farm fool. That old woman was something else. I remember one day when I came home from school crying. No, bawling because the children were teasing me, calling me a kwashi, which meant I was stupid and ignorant. How it came to mean that, I don't know, because the original kwashi was a Maroon who led a rebellion against the British during the slavery days. But to be called a kwashi was no compliment. Well, the story is that I am related to this man kwashi through my grandfather, whose mother was a Maroon. My grandmother took me, sat me down, and told me that being related to kwashi was nothing to be ashamed of. She even told me the story of Nanny. It was the first time I was hearing it. Nanny was queen of the Maroons who stupefied the British with brilliant guerrilla warfare. She would stop bullets with her bottom and catch them with her teeth. She's Jamaica's only female national hero. You see, ever since that day, when the children teased me, I would just say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Sometimes I can feel the Maroon blood in me, you know. Because living in America is like fighting a war. I wish Mama G had come to America to see how it really is. It's been 6 years since she has passed, and I still miss her. I have been battling with this blanket for almost 2 years. First, it was for Lena's grandson's christening. Then Ruby's. She dead and gone too. Now it's for Hyacinth's granddaughter. Hyacinth! She has been one of my best friends since Howard's days. It was me and Hya from Jamaica, Daphne from Trinidad, Josie from Ghana, and Sarah from Sierra Leone. Inseparable. I guess that's because we were more mature than the other girls in the dorms. Today when I walked into Lena's house and saw all the familiar faces, Leo, Miss P, Hyacinth, Preddy, B. Reed, and all them folks, I felt like back in the 60s at one of them Kayo dinners. In those days, Kayo was Kayo, the Caribbean American Intercultural Organization. It was formed in 1958 by a group of 25 Howard graduates who had an ambitious little plan to acculturate the Washington area, to bring the Caribbean to Washington, and to foster an understanding. You see, Leo, he was one of them. That's before we had all these little national organizations. Every August they had a Federation Ball, and in 1963 it became the Independence Ball because both Jamaica and Trinidad had become independent. Now that was a fete and a half, Kaiso Faso. When Cramden Auditorium was built, the first concert that was booked was a Sparrow concert by Kayo. Can you imagine the mighty Sparrow Calypso King live in Washington? The following year, we brought up the National Dance Theatre Company of Jamaica. My head swelled with pride. Today was like one of our regular Sunday evening lines, except, of course, Lena wasn't there. It's been a year since she has passed. She was a wonderful woman. She could cook. One of our unsung heroes. I can't count the plates of curry goat and rice and peas I've eaten at that house. The house was like a social center. Everybody went there. In fact, they used to call it the embassy. Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Bajans, Grenadians, rich, poor, young, old, students, diplomats, politicians, black and white. Everybody. Ambassador Ashenheim, Sangster, the first Prime Minister of Jamaica. Who else? K.D. Knight, now Minister of Justice in Jamaica. John Jr., another Member of Parliament in Jamaica, who went to Howard too. There's a whole lot of Caribbean leaders and politicians who went to Howard, you know. That house was truly an equal opportunity experience. I personally feel that Lena was a driving influence in the civil rights movement. Behind the scenes, of course. You see, Lena used to cook for Robert and Ethel Kennedy, first in the 50s and again in the 70s after Robert was killed. JFK and Jackie would come to the house from time to time. I heard that at the dinner table one Thanksgiving, they were discussing the issue of segregation. Anyway, before I continue, please be assured that I am not one to pass on idle gossip. I am and will always be the kind of woman who believes in minding my own business. But it's like I have a sign across my chest that says, tell me why. People just tell me things. They just come to me and tell me, even when I tell them I don't want to know. They tell me all the same. Anyway, the story is that Rose Kennedy asked Lena what she thought about this business of desegregating restaurants. Miss Lena, she tell her that if white people feel it is safe to eat from black people, she don't see why they should feel unsafe eating with them. Lena, I can't remember when I first met her, but most likely it must have been at some party or another. Somebody or another was always throwing parties. I guess that's because we had nowhere to go. There was no Kite or Kilimanjaro, you know. There was a club, Junk on the Lounge on Connecticut Avenue. Can you imagine a West Indian club owned by an Italian and managed by an African? But how many of the students could afford it? Leo said that his days in the 40s, you know, 2 doctors from Trinidad would alternate throwing parties. That's it. Come to think of it, I did meet Lena at a Kayo party. Now, that was a party to end all parties. It was my first Christmas in America. I may look macheted now, you know, but when I was young, I could have certainly cut me 10. Mashed potato, ska, cha-cha-cha was all in style. They even had one dance called the Roach. From I was a little girl, you know, I had music in my blood like malaria. Sometimes the music would have just take me in my head and I would have just drop a foot. Man, you feel see me mashing potato for so. Somebody would go to the country to buy the goat for the party. In those days, we didn't have all these Caribbean stores like we have now. The first one I can remember is Mr. Walters or Walters and Kennedy. He had a monopoly on the market. I always used to go into the store to buy my salt fish and plantains. Every time I go in the store, he would say to me, "What the teacher want buy today?" Now we can get almost everything in the regular supermarket. Times have surely changed. I knew that for a fact when I saw oxtail, pig feet, tripe in giant supermarket. Can you imagine oxtail, pig feet, tripe, offal? Them still not selling the goat meat though. New York, New York. West Indians started migrating there in significant numbers in the 20s after World War I. When Garvey landed in New York, there was an already established West Indian community with whom he could identify. People didn't start coming to Washington in numbers until the 70s, except for those who came to go to Howard. Take Mr. P, for instance. He came in 1930-something to go to Howard, and he said that when he came, he met other Caribbean people. Now, he has some stories to tell. One day when we were talking, he calmly informed me that had it not been for a West Indian physician named something or another Thornton living in Philadelphia, George Washington would never have put the Capitol where it stands today. I tried to get him to tell me how this Thornton character came to be friends with George Washington, but we never got around to it. There was even one man from Carriacou. I couldn't believe it. Carriacou? Can you? Do you know where Carriacou is? Americans are dismal at geography. Do you know where Barbuda is? How about Bimini? Not bikini. Anyway, getting back to my story, Mr. P studied chemistry up to the master's level, and when he came out of university, he could not find a decent jobs. In fact, black people in the 40s and 50s had to work at the post office, or they were locked up in St. Elizabeth Hospital. I'm not kidding. Howard did a study on it. Engineers graduating from Howard couldn't get jobs as engineers. They had to settle as building superintendents. And just look at us now. We have the son of a Jamaican as head of the United States military. We little but we tell our it true. Just look at Marcus Garvey. I thought I had it bad in the 60s, you know, but it was dream compared to what Leo and his friends went through. On Leo's first day at Howard, he almost got beat up at a little bar just a few blocks from Howard where no niggers, Jews, or dogs were allowed. The Caribbean and African students had a hard time adjusting. They brought with them a sense of pride, which made it difficult for them to forget that in this new society, they were second-class citizens, subhumans. Many a foreign students spent a night in jail. Some for loitering, some for arrogance, some for just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. One guy, he got locked up for rape. Luckily for him, he had a watertight alibi. But let me tell you something. The number of third world leaders, ministers of government, and members of parliament that can call HU their alma mater is impressive. In fact, according to Mr. P, Howard's alma mater was written by a Trinidadian. I must check to see if it's true. Talking about famous Trinis, let's not forget Stokely Carmichael. No, Kwame Ture. No, he was a wild card. He would hold impromptu rap sessions, consciousness raising he would call it, under the big tree in the yard. The teachers used to fear Stokely. If Stokely agreed with the teacher, the class would proceed in peace. If Stokely did not agree, that would be it for teaching for the day. Politics. With a conscious desire not to get involved, it was difficult not to. For example, when Trinidad had their Black Power uprising in 70 or 71, a group of Caribbean students and supporters went and staged a sit-in. They had a protest march from the embassy. One guy got deported. But those Trinis were always out there. They were the first ones to have their own clubhouse, 15th and Delafield Northwest. And let's not forget the steel band. When Preddy came to school in about 1967, I can't remember exactly when, we had a little folk singing group who would go all over the DC area and performed in churches, parks, and such. One year when Preddy went home for carnival, he decided him not coming back without him pan. The first time he played in the park, you should see people looking under the pan trying to figure out where the music coming from. The first Caribbean summer in the park was in 1976. It was at Meridian Hill, that's Malcolm X Park. After that, Washington has never been the same. Before that, everything about us seemed weird. Our food, our music, even our accent. Washington was like a little country town. Dismal. Now we have restaurants all over the place. They even playing a little reggae on mainstream radio. Reggae music take over the place. When I was growing up, nobody in their right mind would ever think of becoming a Rasta, much less wearing locks. Now dreadlocks is a fashionable hairstyle. Everybody is a Rasta or a pseudo-Rasta. The problem is though, you know, people automatically assume you are a Rasta and are a Jamaican. That's how come we get a bad name. Anyway, I guess that's us. Run mongoose, your name gone abroad, fit us fit true. Run, mongoose, your name gone abroad. Run, mongoose, your name gone abroad. Every time I sing those songs, I get so homesick. Oh, gosh. I've missed a few stitches. I have to do it again. You know what is funny? Whenever I am here, I always miss home. And whenever I am home, I miss Washington. Washington must be home too. I'll never finish this blanket. Well, woman's work never done. Evening time, work is over, now is evening time. We go walk pan mountain, go talk pan mountain, go walk pan mountain side. Make we cook the bickle pan the way. Make we eat and sing, dance and play ring ding pan the mountain side. You know what is funny? It's only when I sit and crochet that I get a chance to sit quietly and talk about the good old days. And if I didn't, how would you get to hear the stories I have to tell? You want to hear some more?